Hey everyone, welcome this week to another historical knitting video. I'm really excited to have you guys back. As I was looking for patterns to knit this week, I found a book called The Art of Knitting by the Butterick Publishing Company. And as I was looking to see if this is the same Butterick Publishing Company that publishes sewing patterns, I looked at the record of books that they published, and the first one that I could find for them on this particular site is actually something called the Pattern Cookbook. And I was thinking to myself, the Pattern Cookbook, so is this like a recipe for making your own patterns? And I flipped through it a little bit more. It's a book of recipes, and before I start knitting something, I thought it would be nice for me to cook something or try to bake something and see if I could eat something while I'm looking for my knitting patterns. The one that I ended up choosing to bake, mainly because I had all of the ingredients, is called Mother's Jumbles. Disclaimer, the directions aren't particularly precise on how you prepare these, and I am not a baker or a chef or a cook, and this is, as historically accurate as I can be given the pattern and my very limited baking knowledge. So I'm going to try my best, but I don't really know what the results might turn out to be. So we'll see what happens. Of course, while I'm making these, I'm wearing my 1885 Victorian slippers I made before. The first step is to take 2/3 cupful of butter and cream it together with 1 cupful of sugar. And then I mixed in 3 eggs. To that, I added 3 tablespoonfuls of milk and 2 teaspoonfuls of baking powder. I decided to add a teaspoonful of caraway seeds. There's a choice between nutmeg and caraway, and I decided to go for something different. And now at this point it says, take flour and add it to thicken. Part of the instructions were to roll out the dough, so I added enough until it felt like I was able to roll out the dough. I have no idea if I added the right ratio, but it was enough that I could actually use the rolling pin and roll out the dough. But then when it came time to actually cut out the cookie pieces, which I used my port wine glass to do, things got a little sticky. Maybe I didn't use enough flour on the base of the parchment paper when I was rolling it out, or maybe my ratio of flour to rest of the ingredients weren't right, but I ended up just giving up, rolling them together between my palms and pressing them down. Once I filled my cookie sheet with cookies, I decided to put them in the oven at 350 degrees for about 12 minutes. There weren't any exact instructions, so I just checked on them every once in a while. They're not the most evenly shaped cookies, but they do look nice and golden brown around the edges, and I can't wait to try them. Here they are. I just finished making them. Look at them. Got a whole pile. They smell really nice. I was really kind of interested with the caraway seeds in them because I usually think of caraway as something that's a little bit more intended for like savory dishes rather than sweet dishes. So I'm going to try it. They also said to put some granulated sugar on the front, but it's got a little bit of like the granulated sugar sparkles in the front. That's actually really good. Alright, so while I'm snacking on these cookies, I am also going to go over the pattern that I ended up choosing. The book that I went with is something called The Art of Knitting. And like I said before, this is published by the Butterick Publishing Company in 1892. The reason that I stopped on this one in particular is because I thought the illustrations were just absolutely gorgeous. They have actual pictures in here, it looks like, but I really wanted to try out this knitted purse here in the bottom right corner. And from the little bit of research that I did, once again, I'm not a historian or anything like that, I just do this as a hobby. I found these books late one night and I thought that it would be really fun to try to knit the patterns from them. And it's called the Miser's Purse. So the Miser's Purse is the term for the books, for the purses that were used at the time. And there's lots of examples when you look up miser's purses, what they look like. Like for example, this woman is shopping for one from the 1860s, a beautiful example of a historical one, and I thought that I would try to knit this one in particular in the bottom right. I was originally planning to make the one on the left, but I was looking at the clasps and I'm not sure that I could get something similar. Like I wasn't sure where to look to find fastenings that work in that way. So I thought it would be easier for me to find, maybe rings and other things that could easily mimic what the purse looks like on the bottom right instead. So that's the one that I'm going to make. I'm really excited. and we'll see how it turns out. Wish me luck. This one has a lot of nice illustrations and a lot of detail in the instructions, but I definitely have a problem with knitting gauge, and this yarn that we're using today is really, really, really thin. So I hope that I can get the gauge right so that the purse actually turns out with the right dimensions. I'm using a yarn from Knit Picks called Luminous Lace. It is 100% lace, and it's this really, really nice emerald green color, and I believe the colorway is called Thoughtful. Now this comes as a skein, which means that I have to actually wind it into a ball myself, and I'm going to do that using this yarn swift here that you tension the skein around itself, and the ball winder on the right. Ball winder is a little bit old, but it still functions, so it's all good. And of course I'm doing this out on my porch because it is a beautiful spring day once again, and I really like being outside. So the first step is to unwind the skein itself, making sure that I don't, tangle up any of these yarn pieces. The yarn itself is really, really thin. It's like lace weight, so when I'm putting it over the Swift itself, I have to be a bit careful because there's some hooks at the top that make it easy for me to catch the yarn in it. So I'm trying to be a little careful here, not putting the Swift at its full tension so I can fit the skein over it, and then tensioning it up so that it actually holds the yarn in place. The next step, which I tend to forget, is to remove these little brown yarn pieces that are actually keeping the yarn in line when it's twisted up. Making sure not to cut through the actual lace itself. Here the front and the back is actually tied to each other, so that's another cut that I had to do. And make sure just to pull that out so that when you're unwinding it, it doesn't get tangled. Then you want to thread your yarn through that little eye hole there to kind of keep the tension steady, as well as through the slits on the top of the ball winder that starts out the actual winding of your ball of yarn. So there you can go. I'm starting it out. It's a little hiccupy because, like I said, the ball winder is quite old, but the Swift runs really well, and I am winding up this yarn. You can see I hold the yarn actually in my left hand a little bit for some extra tension because, once again, the ball winder has some issues because it's a little bit old, but it works well enough. I have wound up the lace weight yarn into this yarn ball, trying to undo it with one hand. I'm living a little dangerously here, but it worked. I actually got it wound up, and I really like how this color looks. It's coming out a little dark on camera, but the green is quite rich and vibrant when you see it. As usual, I struggled quite a bit in trying to knit up this pattern. It's a series of purl two togethers and yarn overs, but for some reason when I did them back and forth on subsequent rows, it really threw me for a loop. But I did manage to actually get it going. I don't have the footage anymore, unfortunately, of the longer pieces that I did, but here you can see me trying to do this pattern. This is the one that's actually written for that purse pattern that I chose, but when I had a few inches of this type of material, this type of fabric that it knit up, it was just far too loose, and I was afraid that if I'm actually going to be holding anything in the purse, it would just absolutely fall apart. My gauge is just a little too loose, I think, and maybe my needles aren't delicate enough to actually make this a viable material to use. So here you can see there's a few rows knit up, and it's very, very lacy, and I was just afraid that it wasn't structurally sound enough. So what I ended up doing is scrapping all of this. I scrapped it so many times I can't even tell you, but I decided to reuse the pattern, like the lace pattern of that original purse that I wanted to make on the left hand side, which I'll show you guys here, you can see, and actually transfer that onto the lace portions of the right miser's purse look. And this is, you can see it's coming together, so it still has that lace feel, but it's not quite so open in the actual fabric itself. I kept on knitting back and forth until I had 4 or 2 repeats of the lace pattern, depending on what you consider a repeat. And here you can see what that looks like. And at this point, I decided to move to the stockinette stitch part of it, or the plain knitting part of it. And this is kind of where that slot for the coin will go in. So this piece is knitted flat first and then actually sewn together at the end, because you want one side to be squared off and one to be rounded. So here you can see I finished my rows of plain knitting, and you have the lace on one side, and now I'm going to repeat that exact same lace at the other end. So I'm just gonna redo the whole lace pattern one more time, and then it'll just be a symmetrical piece with 2 lace sections at each end and a stockinette section in the middle. So here you can see that I'm actually finishing off the last lace section. So now what you're going to end up with is a flat piece of knitting which has lace on both sides with stockinette knitting in the middle. And what you're going to do is you're going to sew up the lace ends with each other, and then you're going to leave a 2.5-inch slit in the middle where the plain stockinette is, in order to be able to access both ends of this miser's purse. Usually it held coins or some form of money, so that's what you're going to do. So you can see here I am actually sewing it up. I think it took me nearly as long to sew it up as it did to knit. It's so fiddly. But I actually ended up squaring off one side and rounding off the other when I knit it together, because from my read this is pretty common, so that you can keep one kind of coin in one side and another kind in the other side, and just from looking at the purse you can tell which side has the money that you're looking for. 5 cents versus 25 cents, something like that. So here you see that I've knitted up, and there is the slit that I left, the 2.5-inch approximately slit in the middle. And when I was drying the purse, I wet it a little bit on the lace ends, and I stuffed it so that the lace work would come out and actually be visible, because I thought it was really beautiful. Now the finishing step is to put some beading on it. Here you can see the inspiration that I used for the beading on the ends of this miser's purse. I've never done beading before outside of, I don't know, maybe like an arts and crafts project I did in kindergarten, so this is really just trying my best to interpret it as well as I can, and also making sure that when I'm securing the beads to the purse that they are sturdy and will hold and won't fall apart if I actually want to use it or someone wants to use it. The other thing that was pretty difficult for me was making sure that it was even, both in length and distance, and that kind of each end of the purse is balanced. So I think this side actually turned out quite well. And then what I wanted to do on the other side is to add this tassel with this beautiful bead that I saw at Joann's. Basically, I found it there. So I decided to put, I think it was 4 or 5 loops. I stopped when I thought that the balance was right between the left and the right side, so you can see it there. I thought that worked out really nicely, and you can see it a little bit closer detail. I tried to string it on nice and tight so you couldn't see the green lace yarn in between, but not so tight that it was stiff. Now here I am demonstrating how to use this purse. So the rings are what's used to open and close it, and I actually added the rings before I added the beading. So you can see that when you slide the ring away from the end that you want to use, that opens up that slit that you left and allows you to put the coins into one end. Now I'm going to slide the ring back towards that end where I just put the coins in, and this actually closes that side off, and I slid the other ring away from that end, which allows me to put a different kind of coin onto that side of the purse. When you slide both rings back towards each end, you actually secure both sides of your coin purse or your miser's purse. Now, in order to get everything back out, you slide the ring away from the side that you want to access, which opens up the slit and allows you to actually slide out the coins from that end. And I'll just show you one more time on the other end. So you slide the ring back to the right, both rings back to the right hand side, which allows you access through the slit to that side of the purse and allows you to get your coins out. Thank you guys so much for watching this week. I had a lot of fun trying to knit up this miser's purse. I had no idea how it worked until I started researching it myself, and I find it a pretty fascinating way to carry around your money. If you liked watching me knit, feel free to like, subscribe, and comment on this video. Give me as much feedback as you want. I always love hearing more about it. This week I decided that I'm also going to post the pattern for this purse. Once again, you can go off of the raw pattern that I found in the book, which I'll link below, or you can try out Mad Pattern, where I kind of merged the two different purses that I found and liked together. And anyway, yeah, thank you again for watching, and I'll see you guys again really soon.